guys, and welcome to my channel. I'm so grateful to have you as a viewer today. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. We are here to bring you the best personal development content that you can find out there. Here at the Swan Podcast, our main intention is to educate you, empower you, and evolve your life. So if you love all things personal development and transformation, then this is the place for you. If you're new, make sure that you subscribe and hit the like button before the video is over so you don't forget. And be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms at The Real Ashley Watkins and at The Swan Podcast. Enjoy the show. All right, guys, and welcome back to another episode of The Swan Podcast. We're on episode 6 now, and today we have a very special guest. I'm so excited to talk to her. Her name is Tracy Cobb, and she's a licensed therapist and relationship strategist. So today we're going to be having a real deal conversation about narcissistic personality disorder. And I'm going to let Tracy tell us a little bit about herself. So, hi, Tracy. How you doing?
Hi, Ashley. I'm doing very well, I'm excited to be here today to talk
Thank
to you.
you. Thank you so much for coming on. So you work a lot in relationships, and I wanted you to talk to us a little bit about how you got into therapy and doing counseling and a little bit of your personal story.
Okay. Well, I was an administrative assistant, and I worked in corporate America for over 25 years, but I always was the person that people came to for help. So I got tired, literally. I got tired. I got tired of the grind. I got tired of feeling, overwhelmed and overworked. So I decided to go back to school, went back to school and got my master's degree. I initially got into this because I was like discouraged by love and relationships between Black men and Black women. And a friend of mine, we decided to do something called a relationship roundtable. But the perfectionist in me felt like we couldn't just do that. So I felt like what I needed to do was go back to school and get a full education around why people do what they do, how they become who they are, all of those different things, which literally led me to, becoming a licensed professional counselor. And the rest is kind of, history.
Okay, I like that. So I'm going to back up a little bit before we get deep into it. What was the round table like? What were you guys doing at the round table?
Ooh. See, what we were hoping, living in Atlanta, because I didn't say that. I didn't really talk about who I am. So I work in Atlanta. I was a single mom with 2 kids, and trying to date was horrible, like horrible. Men would say, oh, yeah, I'm ready for a woman that's this and that's that. So my girlfriend and I was like, well, wow. If we come up with a way where we could bring good men and good women together, some relationships would have to come from that, right? So you're thinking like a mixer. There's no pressure. Men are there. They can, you can kind of get to know who a person is without the pressure of, oh, are we dating? Let's define this. What does this mean? It didn't work. Clearly. It didn't work. So, we kind of just said, okay. And so for me, I needed to go deeper because that's kind of who I am. I'm like, okay, I need to go deeper. And, I knew that I wanted to help people. I feel like I had been that my whole life.
Right. So I feel like it's your purpose.
Absolutely. So the relationship roundtable kind of led me into going, taking up the mantle of going back to school, which was a challenge. But I did it. I loved it. And I love the field. I love helping people. I love sitting across from people and holding space for them so that they can help themselves to become what it is that they desire to become.
Yeah, and that's not easy to sit with yourself or even to sit with a therapist or anyone. But I think that you have to kind of have it in you. I remember when I started going to therapy, I used to think that I was like burdening my therapist. But to know that like she did that and that's her career and she went to school for it, it gave me a little bit of, calmness. So I'm happy that you created that and that is for you and you love doing it. That's really, really, really important. So we're going to talk a little bit about narcissism, which I'm over here getting anxious because I wanted to talk about you first. But when I first met you, just so the listeners can get my perspective, of my conversation with you when we first met. We talked on the phone. I was just like, man, she is so bomb. She has so much information, and I didn't know what to talk to you about, but we just randomly through talking, narcissistic personality disorder came up, and I was like, whoa, wait, we probably need to talk about that first, because I've talked about trauma on the show. I've talked about some other things. We've went there, but this one is huge because I think that, and you even said this, now the word narcissist is just thrown around. So let's start. I'm going to ask you, in your words, or in the simplest way possible, what is narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder? Are they the same? Like, what is it?
Okay. So my words, because each person has their own view, and you may speak to another therapist or a psychiatrist and they may see it differently. But narcissistic personality disorder is a personality disorder, not so much a mental illness. It's almost where your experiences change who you become. Narcissistic personality disorder or narcissists, actual narcissists have the idea that the whole world is about them, and kind of saying it in layman's terms, because really it's a repetitive feeling or thinking that you are the whole world, like everything revolves around you. So a narcissist in their mind can do no wrong. Everything, every word, every action, the sun shines to serve them. Right. So when I talk about narcissistic personality disorder versus like narcissistic traits, like there are people who are very self-centered. So being self-centered is a little bit different than being a full-blown narcissist or having narcissistic personality disorder. I remember being a part of a group where people were talking about it, and oftentimes people don't realize that giving someone that label when they're not it probably is worse than not labeling at all. So I remember listening to one of your other podcasts that it's very important when we label people that we're careful, because people usually live up or down to those labels.
Right.
So
yeah, that's important too.
Yeah. So as far as the narcissist is concerned, they operate in a grandiose manner. Everything about them is fabulous. They have all the best of everything. Best car, best house. They find themselves operating with the best people. The people who they're around are, Michelle Obama, Jay-Z people. Like it's that, because in their mind, they've set themselves up as that, as being the best of everything. And it's really hard because we don't want people to not feel good about themselves. But I think the biggest thing about being a narcissist is that there is no empathy, concern, or care for the other people around you. And that's the biggest thing.
Okay,
so
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. A person can have narcissistic traits, or, where they are very grandiose and those things, but they still have the capacity for empathy and care and concern for other people. But a true narcissist has none.
Right, because someone is going to be listening. I'm happy you said that, because someone's going to be listening and they're going to say, well, isn't the whole point of life is to have the best of everything and to accomplish these goals and be surrounded by awesome friends and everything like that? So I'm happy that you made that clarification, because, oftentimes when we're listening to something or we're learning about something, we may be in the defense mode because we're listening to make sure it's not us, or to make sure we don't see that in our man that we love or something like that. So I'm happy you said the part about the lack of empathy and the lack of compassion. So can you tell us what it looks like in real life for the difference between a person that has narcissistic traits? Because I see this a lot, and I always stop myself and I'm like, but I don't want to label them. But I can't really tell, if they actually have that empathy. So how do we know, what are some of the signs and symptoms that someone that is more on the narcissistic side is showing?
Versus somebody with traits. So I think the biggest thing is that whole idea of whether that person can hold space and have empathy for another person. I think that's where the line is drawn. Because
Okay.
if you talk about a man or woman in a relationship and everything is about them, they don't care whether their spouse or their children eat. They may, cheat. They may do a whole plethora of things that are detrimental to the people that they allegedly love.
Right.
And there's no compassion. They just don't care. They they have no desire to do anything but what builds them up. The other thing about narcissists is that oftentimes they have had some type of trauma in their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
So narcissistic personality disorders often happens to a child who has experienced some trauma and is using this ability to be the best of everything to protect themselves from
Mm.
being hurt again.
Right.
So if you've been abused, say you grew up in an abusive household and every day you came home and you were beat.
Mm-hmm.
So what now might happen is you have to insulate yourself from that. You have to protect yourself. So maybe you don't end up with like several personalities, but you have figured out how, if I have no compassion, no care, or any of those things, and I focus on myself, I don't have to worry about anybody else. I'll just take care of myself.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. That's very, very interesting because I knew it came from childhood, but I didn't understand how the lack of compassion can come from trauma. And it's funny that even in my own personal experience, I had a traumatic childhood from my perspective. And but through going through therapy, I learned compassion. So I know that because I wasn't taught compassion. Like that doesn't exist in my family. In a lot of Black families, it's just like, well, you know. But I'm wondering because I know I learned compassion. I'm an empathetic person. I know you described yourself as an empathetic
Mhm,
person.
mhm.
So why can't the narcissist learn compassion? Where is that? Why is that wall there?
Well, the wall is there for protection.
Oh,
So
okay.
you put that wall up, and you know that the times when you did not have that wall up, you were hurt.
Hmm.
The times, it may often come from the people who were supposed to take care of you and protect you could not.
Right.
Oftentimes because of their own personal trauma. If you're talking about people of color specifically, the trauma of slavery, you know, the Middle Passage, civil rights, slavery, all of that stuff is passed down in our DNA. So oftentimes we don't necessarily know how to have compassion if compassion isn't rained upon us.
Right.
So, there people will say, listen, my mama whipped my ass. I turned out fine. No, you really didn't. Because now you're doing it to your kids, and now your kids don't feel like they have a voice. They
Right.
don't feel protected. They don't feel like they can be who they are in a space and be loved in spite of it. I know I've had clients and I know people who have had parents who brutally beat them, like brutally, thinking, okay, well you'll learn better next time. No, what I learned is to wall myself in. And what a narcissist will do is wall themselves in and focus on self. So as far as I'm concerned, I have to protect myself, and the way that I protect myself is that I build this life of grandiosity. Everything about me is fabulous. So as I was doing my research, I told you before that I did a little bit of
You went
research,
deeper.
yeah, around why it happens. So
Mhm.
some people believe that it happens based on environment, the environment between parent and child. If you've grown up with a person or a family member who doesn't necessarily have compassion, you may have that built into you, but some people end up without having access to that. So they don't see that as being necessary. Either extreme adoration, like you may have a parent who, and oftentimes it's mothers who love their sons so much so that their sons can't do any wrong. So if
Mhm.
your mother's telling you that you can't do nothing wrong, why wouldn't you treat everybody else in the world like, listen, I'm the best ever? So sometimes it's that, or excessive criticism. If you're constantly criticized about how you ain't worth nothing, you just like either your mother or your father who ain't here. All of those things build into children and people, period. And
Mhm.
we become a walking tape of everything we've heard,
Right.
everything that we hear. So that's one of the reasons. Genetics. There are ideas that it's genetically predisposition for people, and sometimes it comes with other mental health disorders as well. So
Right.
it could be, that neurobiology, there are people who believe that there are connections that are supposed to happen in your head that misfire and don't happen. And like I said, I think the biggest thing in my own experience with a narcissist was what seemed to be protected behavior, protection mechanism by him to keep himself from engaging fully with people. Because I think what happens is that they have a hard time emotionally connecting with people. Now, they like to look like they do. They definitely look like they connect with people, but it's for show.
Right.
It's not for the real emotional part of it. It's just for the show part, and they often try to mirror what other people do so it looks like they're connected, but they oftentimes are not.
That is so spot on. So my first experience with I'm not gonna diagnose this person because he wouldn't go to therapy, so we don't know.
Right.
But my first experience with someone that had narcissistic traits, I was so confused because
Yeah.
I was just so confused. And that is part of the relationship is I never knew I didn't understand what was going on. So like a couple of things that you said rang so true. So the first red flag, which we ignore red flags, was
Mm-hmm.
that he was not taking care of his children. And I couldn't understand
Mm.
his psyche around it. I mean, he even blamed the kids, and my children at the time were little, and his children were 12, 13, and he would say, "You don't understand because you don't have teenagers. And teenagers are just more difficult." And he would always have a way where he was actually the victim from
Yes.
him not taking care of his children. And that is what was misaligning for me because I'm such a parent first that was the first red flags. And there was, like you said, the mirroring. If I even to I'm not going to put this person on Front Street, but if today I went to his social media, you would see extravagant cars, you will see him staying in hotels, and this person is not financially stable. He is in a delusion. He's very selfish. If I would ever
Mm-hmm.
question, are you going to do something for me? He would cuss me out. Like how
Right.
dare I ask him to do something for
Right.
me? And
Right.
and then it would confuse me because then I come from a household where I had a narcissistic parent. So I had that huge inner critic, like you said, from being criticized a lot. Then I'd start to go, am I tripping? Is he right? Am I being selfish? Now
Right.
I'm thinking it's me. So there's a lot of things that play into where if you're dealing with that narcissist and you don't understand what everything you just explained, and my self-awareness wasn't 100. So
Right.
I was totally confused, and there was this pull that I couldn't understand. Why am I attracted to this? I didn't even understand that I
Right.
had a narcissistic parent, and that this
Right.
felt like normal to me, and it was
Normalcy. Right.
toxic as hell. So
Yes.
toxic.
Yes.
So I
A
definitely
narcissist.
say,
Yeah, a narcissistic relationship is definitely toxic. I will tell you that the person that I dealt with, who, mind you, he told me. So this just tells you he told me. Yeah, I was diagnosed narcissist, and
oh,
at this time I had already got my degree. I was working towards becoming a full complete therapist, and I still, because the person that he was, so he was very, in the beginning, very attentive, very caring, very generous. To this
mm-hmm,
day, he is very generous. He has the ability to be generous. He has the ability to give when he wants to. But when he does not want to, it's literally everything is stripped away. It's like snatching the tablecloth from the table and destroying everything that's there. So for me, I was confused because I'm saying, well, he says his words say he liked me, but he don't
right,
really act like he liked me. When you're talking about a narcissist in a relationship, in a love relationship, oftentimes the relationship begins really fast. And you think you done hit the jackpot.
mm-hmm,
You think that this person is the best thing since sliced bread. And in the beginning, the first 3, 4 months, it was that way. Then after a while, because now, see, because you can wear the mask, they talk about the narcissistic mask, the
mm,
mask is there. But the longer you get to know somebody, the more you're around them, the mask starts to crack, and then they begin to see you and you begin to see them. You begin to see the real things that they can't really hide so much.
right,
So for what I understood as how love was, again, we talked about the relationship roundtable and believing that if people say they really want to be in relationships, they really do. That ain't true. That I know
That's
now.
not.
But yeah, it's not. So I began to see these polar opposite sides of him. Wonderful, loving, great, great to people and all of that kind of stuff. But then in quiet, there were sides that were really angry
Mhm.
and rageful, and I was sometimes afraid. I'm gonna be honest with you. So I'm really coming clean here because I'm saying stuff that some people don't even know. But there
Right.
were times when I was afraid because I wasn't really sure who this person was.
Yeah.
But so the other insidious part about it is that what I kept trying to do was get back to that person that I met in the beginning.
Right.
I wanted to bring him back. So I began to put it on me because if I'm the problem, then I can fix it. But
Mhm.
the problem wasn't me. So what I had to figure out through the process was why, again, like you said, why am I attracted to this? And what deficits is this bringing up in me? What is it triggering in me that I feel like I want this?
Right.
I want to make this work. I want to make this relationship work. I want to give this person love when they clearly were not able to receive it in the manner in which I wanted to give it.
Okay, so that's a good segue because what's going through my head right now as you're speaking is me dating other young women out there dating or whatever age. And because I know after I dated the narcissist, he did what you said, he love bombed. Things moved really fast. I thought it was a
Mhm.
miracle. But after
Right.
that, then when I would meet really good guys, because we hear about marriages where someone meets someone and they fall in love with them and they do treat them good and it lasts and they get married and they're in their 80s now and it's happily ever
Right.
after. So now, I know after I dated him, I would not be able to gauge when someone really did like me and it was genuine and they probably were going to stay like that. They didn't have any
Right.
ill motives or anything. And when someone is love bombing and they're studying me just to maybe manipulate me later, and I couldn't find the balance of what's safe and
Right.
what's not safe now because now I'm too confused because that other person did feel safe in the beginning.
Right. Right, right. And
Yeah.
I'm afraid. So from my own personal experience and from what I know just from dealing with other people, one of the things that I had to do is I had to go and get help. I had to figure out what was going on because I couldn't figure it out. But I ended up at the time I went to CODA meetings
Mhm.
because there was a pattern in my life.
Oh
There was
wait,
a
tell us what
pattern.
coda is because we talked about this, but
Oh, okay.
everybody
I'm sorry.
doesn't know.
Yeah. So CODA is Codependency Anonymous. So it's very similar to Alcoholics Anonymous, where it's people who come together for a group meeting and they talk about the issues that they have with codependency,
Mhm.
with relationships that didn't work. At the time, I didn't have insurance, so I couldn't go to a therapist. And I went to CODA. And it was very helpful because it allowed me to see my part of the idea of what do I think about me? What am I saying to myself? What is the acceptance of someone who is not capable of loving me,
Right.
telling myself about me? So my process was I was I was working and I was going through this whole natural hair process. I was having to come clean with myself. So
Mhm.
this all came together at the same time. I probably look younger than I am, but I relaxed my hair for 35 plus years. And
Wow.
after a while, it started to fall out, and I didn't understand what it was. And my stylist was like, "Listen, you got to stop." I'm in our community. Hair is everything. Hair is
Right.
everything. We base everything. We base our self worth on what we look like on the outside. I had to look inside, and Coda was the beginning of me looking inside
So
because
is
I
it
was. I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. Is it true that because what do you think it was in you? So is it true that empaths attract narcissists? Is that a thing or is that just something that people say?
Um. So I apologize because I didn't really answer your question, but yes, that is what I believe. I do believe that empaths are a gateway. They're open. Their whole goal, they're built to support others. And
Mhm.
if you're not careful, if you don't have boundaries, you will be. in the position where you always want to help. You want to do over and over again. Well, baby, what can I do for you? I know this is happening for you. What do you need? How can I help you? And a person who understands that and is caring is going to reciprocate. But a person who's a narcissist, 9 times out of 10, is not going to reciprocate.
That
So
is true.
you asked me about how do you know? I think it's just a matter of time and trusting yourself.
Mm,
Like, you have to take the time to get to know people.
that's true.
In 3 months, I had the feeling that this was a man who I was going to probably be with forever. And and I'm gonna be honest with you, I gotta give to him because he was a grown man about his whole life. He had things that I had not seen before. He had options that I hadn't seen before, and that was attractive. He was a man who worked with his hands. That was attractive. A lot of him reminded me of my dad, who unfortunately had passed away. So there
Right.
were things that kind of drew. It was almost like a perfect storm.
Right.
So when I found this, I'm thinking, I know my daddy sent this one for me because he's very much like my daddy, but that wasn't true. The other side of it is we oftentimes have this vision of what our relationships are supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really want to see things for what they really are. If a person is given too much in the beginning, you just take a step back. Nobody says you don't move forward. You just take a step back and see what's really happening. Because some of the other things that narcissists do is they gaslight, they lie. They are, they're never really present with you. It's always about the next thing. Like, he wouldn't oftentimes not say, well, how was your day? What's going on with you? He was always the center.
Right.
And because I love to engage people, that was amazing to me because I've been out with dudes who didn't want to share anything about themselves.
Right.
So we have to just take a step back and say, okay, am I seeing what I'm seeing really real? The other part of it, we can't let outside people kind of give us the idea that, girl, that's something good. You need to hold on to that. We got to take stock of what's going on with ourselves.
Yeah. I think a lot of times too, what I'm seeing just in the relationship world is, and people might not agree with me, but women forget that like we're the prize. And sometimes the guy, like you said, if they're impressive, and I know this has happened to me numerous times. I live in LA. I've dated a lot of successful men. And when they come with the package, quote unquote package, then I'm just like, I automatically put him on a pedestal because we have this society telling us that Black men don't got no jobs or they own places and they own cars. So you meet this guy, if he's in corporate America, if he seems to have his little credit together or whatever it is that you think is on your list, you're blinded because you're like, finally, this is somebody that I can build with. And then you're not even paying attention to yourself at all. So I think that the self-worth is very low. I know there's times that I've dated guys that I've been thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm a waitress. He's way out of my league. And I think it's like that mindset of this person is so, even you think they're grandiose, they think it, but you like, oh yeah, he's the shit. And I think that adds to it. It adds fuel to the fire because I'll notice even in meeting guys where if I'm even asking of anything or I have requirements or boundaries, I can already tell that no other women that they've dated have had any requirements or boundaries. And I'm like,
absolutely.
You guys have been just doing whatever the fuck y'all want to do, huh? This whole time. And you can tell it's like women as a whole, we got to raise our self-worth so that we can't really be love bombed because it's not so impressive to us when he goes all out of his way in the first month or so. We're not like, ooh, and then I'll say personally that I had to get to know myself and trust myself because I was not trusting the good guys, and trusting the ones that weren't right for me. And I'm like, wait, you got to get clear because then when there's a guy that's completely okay and safe, you don't know, and I think that does come with being an empath because we just pick up everything from everywhere and we don't know what's ours. So I want to kind of get into, we talked a little bit about it, but for people that are dealing with narcissistic people or people that have narcissistic traits and they can't just remove them from their life, like it could be their husband, it could be their mother, it could be their child. What tips, because we know if a narcissist is listening to this right now, they're sitting there going, this ain't me.
Sure,
So
absolutely. Or some might be saying, "Yeah, that's me," but that's me. This
that's
is who I am. You choose, you accept it or you don't accept it.
right.
I think I just want to go back to what we were when you were saying. I think the real key is love. If you love yourself,
Mm-hmm.
if you love yourself, and a lot of us don't, you know,
True.
or we think that love is the things that we surround ourselves with. Love is looking at internally at yourself, flaws and all, and acceptance. You know, I think I told you when we talked on the phone. My mantra is the only person I have to love and accept is me. The
Mm-hmm.
only person I owe a love and acceptance to, unconditional love and acceptance to, is me. Because guess what? When I dealt with the narcissist, I loved him more than I loved me. I was willing to accept things about him, and there were things about myself that I couldn't look at and accept. So I think when we're strong in our self compassion, self love, and self worth, it'll be a little bit harder for a narcissist to infiltrate our life. Because even if it's not a narcissist, a person who doesn't have our best interest at heart, that's not their fault, because takers take. They don't know
Right.
how to not take. We have to put up the boundaries, the balance and boundaries, to make sure that we protect ourselves. And so we can navigate this world, because as an empath, I don't want to just sit in the house afraid that a narcissist is going to come at me. I'm going to get out
Hello.
in the world and do me. But
Yeah.
if I have the boundaries set, and if I go through the healing that I need, if I work on myself, if I recognize the patterns of my life, because I had to look at me, I had to look at my patterns. What was I experiencing? I had a loving father, but he was very emotionally pulled back, emotionally detached.
Mm-hmm.
Because his mother died when he was 5, so he didn't get that. So
Right.
if you understand those things, you can help yourself to change. It's awareness. But as far as what people who are dealing with narcissists can do, again, building into yourself,
Mm-hmm.
loving care and compassion for yourself. I think the other thing is that you have to accept people as they are.
That's true.
You do. So if it's your parent, you have to understand, like, a lot of times people feel like, well, you know, this is the parent that I have, and this is not fair because the parent shouldn't do this, and this is not fair, and I don't want this parent. But that's the parent you have. You have to accept them as they are. And a lot of times they're doing the best they can. Even my
Right.
narcissist, he was doing the best he could. I had to learn that I can't expect him to be this person when all of his experiences and all of his life situations put him where he is right here. So part of the therapist is meeting people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard. None of this is easy. Dealing with a narcissist is not easy. Living with a narcissist, whether it's your husband, whether it's your wife, because women are narcissists too, whether it's your
Mm-hmm.
parent, whether it's your child, we have to, you know, have some type of acceptance. But again, balance and boundaries, borders, put up boundaries. I had rickety boundary fences. If you look at it like a house with a rickety fence, everybody could have came up and through, because there was nothing there to stop it. And I
Right.
had to change that. They're not. They couldn't.
Yeah.
So another thing that I think people have to do is that they have to understand that you can remove yourself when the time is right. Because most people have to go no contact,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't, you're not going to change them. You're not. We're not going to change them.
That's what I was going to say in regards to advice, because sometimes a narcissistic person that you can't get away from, or someone that has those traits, they gaslight. That's a big,
Right.
big thing. In an argument, they're coming towards you with things that are making you feel like, am I crazy? Didn't I remember this? They
Right.
lying or whatever. So in those situations, I felt like this with a parent, and I didn't know how to get out. Like, what do I do? You're my parent. I don't want to disrespect you. Um, I know what I do, but do you have any advice for when you're in that exact moment? Someone's gaslighting you, someone is not showing compassion. You could be maybe even in public and they're doing something
Right.
shitty, and you're like, what do I do in this moment? Because you're going to have an emotional reaction, or maybe have
Right.
your feelings hurt or whatever. How can you kind of stop that if you are talking to the person?
In the moment, I don't know that you can stop them, other than if you have the courage to tell him, listen, don't treat me this way. But 9 times out of 10, you don't have that ability, which is part of the problem. You don't have the ability to say, listen, don't treat me this way. So one, like I said, is no contact, whether it's removing yourself from that situation, saying, you know, sometimes you have to just say, okay, and move on. And I think the biggest thing is educating yourself about who that person is and how narcissism plays itself out for those people, because then you can make decisions about whether you want to deal or not, and how you deal. Because it's hard if you're a kid. If you're a child, my heart goes out to children of narcissists, because they're stuck.
Right.
They are stuck trying to figure out the chaos and the madness. But I think as they grow older, you have to be able to learn what it is that's happening if you're open to it. And it's unfortunate sometimes narcissists beget narcissists. So you have that cycle going on. But that's why it's so insidious, because there's not an easy answer to what to do. I was lucky. I wasn't married to him, because and I could go get in my car and go home. Right. And then there would be times when I would no contact. So I would go a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Then I'd miss him. And then I'd be like, oh, whatever. Or he'd call and be like, hey, you want to go out and get something to eat? And I'm like, yeah, sure.
Right.
So the human part of it is that. But I also had to begin to tell myself that this man is not going to change. He can't. So the only person who can make changes for the better is me. How do I deal with him? How do I deal with this? I either decide not to deal at all, or I have to accept him as he is. And I know that's probably controversial. I know people are going to be like, I ain't accepting no narcissist. Right. But that's all I could do. That's really all I could do. And it's not powerless. For me, it gives me power, because then I get to deal or not deal.
Yeah, because some people are going to decide to stay with the person or stay in the marriage, or, right. They might say that, well, this person may not do this, but they have other I know a lot of women, they're older than me, that believe that stability is more important than getting to love or affection or whatever it is that they think that they want. So, there's a codependent aspect to it. I know with my narcissistic parent, I have definitely codependent traits in that situation because of the whole life of having that relationship. And like you said, you miss the person. You're like, but I miss you. You can't help that you have that pull with that person. So, all I can say is, like you said, for anybody that is in a situation with the person is to love themselves, because once you love yourself and put yourself first, you're going to be able to make decisions that benefit you, and not necessarily, I make decisions that benefit me over my kids, over anybody. So hopefully people can get some growth from that. You gave some really, really, really good tips, but now is the time for me to ask you, okay, one, do you have any books or anything that you recommend people read? Not necessarily based towards narcissism, but just self-love, or things that you use or tools that you use that might be able to help people that are listening?
As I was experiencing this, I had some, I had to learn about attachment. I had to learn about attachment disorder. Why did I find myself patterned in relationships I felt like I was in relationships with men who were emotionally unavailable. That's clearly what a narcissist is. And when I took the time to look back, I had to figure out how to remove myself from that. So I have some great resources. One of my favorite people ever is Brene Brown. And I'm not sure if you know Brene Brown.
I think
She's
talked
one
about
of my
Brene.
favorite people. Yes. Oh my goodness. I saw her TED Talk, and then I read practically every one of her books. And I would go on YouTube, and she has like hours and hours worth of like workshops and stuff like that. And it was amazing to me, because, part of it is that we have to own the story. The only way we can change our lives is if we own our story. Because once we own it, we can change it.
Right.
So Brene Brown, one of the first books that she did was I Thought It Was Just Me, which kind of goes into, we have this idea that we need to be perfect and that we have to prove something. And we think it's just us. But a lot of people are, in the same space. And she was very helpful with that. And the other one was The Gift of Imperfection. Because clearly we're all walking this tightrope of, I'm perfect, but I'm not perfect. I'm perfect, but I'm not perfect. I want to look perfect. I want to feel perfect, but I'm not. So that was one of them. Kristen Neff and selfcompassion.org. She has this she has a book series, and she talks about the proven power of being kind to yourself. Oftentimes when we make mistakes or when we have difficult times, we beat ourselves up. And she talks about how self-compassion is more important than self-esteem, because self-esteem is focused on doing something well in order to be given praise. But self-compassion is just treating yourself well just because you're here. Telling yourself that, you know what, we're going through some difficult times. Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, coronavirus. A lot of people feel like they should still be operating like it's 2019 when everything was,
Right.
everything. And you can't. So having self-compassion, that was huge for me. Just really understanding that this was difficult. Dealing with a narcissist is difficult. And I had never done it before, but that I would be okay. But I had to take care of myself, because a lot of times we treat ourselves worse than we treat our enemies. You're nice to people you can't stand, and you beat
Right.
your own self up. Right. So those two, and then Harville Hendrix, he has a book out called Getting the Love You Want. That was amazing to me too, because it taught me about attachments, how people attach, and how what you need to offer, what you need to be in order to find the love that you're looking for. Because there are processes. We oftentimes, the first love we have is the love of our parents, and we're often looking to heal the relationships with our parents through our love relationships. Let me tell you, that was so deep for me,
That's true.
because it was true.
Mm-hmm.
It was true. I also listened to a podcast called Pandora's Box.
Oh, okay.
And it was specifically on the healing of narcissism, healing from a narcissist relationship. But if you Google, there are tons of people who do podcasts on, healing narcissism. But she was really good. So it was Pandora's Box by a lady. Her first name is Kalia, Kaleah.
All right, we'll look into those. And I saw the Brene Brown TED Talk too. It's really, really, really good. So if you guys haven't seen it, check it out. So now is your spotlight. How do we find you? What do you do? How do you book a session? I know you're in Atlanta. I meant to say that when I first came on, that we in the ATL. Yeah. If you're in Atlanta and you want a counselor, you got Miss Cobb here. But tell us your website, your social media, all your stuff.
So I'm really not I'm on social media, but I always have to check, and I did not write it down, so that's kind of messed up. But my website is therapist-tracy.com. So that's my website if somebody wants to book. I also do coaching. So even if a person is not in Atlanta, because I can't technically be a therapist for a person who's not living in Atlanta, but I do coaching. I also do group, and especially now with, coronavirus and social distancing, we can do group online. And, I'm working on helping, my goal is to help women specifically to feel good about themselves and to get to the good part. Feeling good is not every day I'm popping my collar. It's being able to process the stuff that is challenging, because each of us is going to have challenges in our lives. And if we're not able to figure out how to take a step back, give ourselves some grace and some compassion, we'll stumble through our whole lives. When I started this, I thought my goal was to work with women who were in transition, like me, empty nesters. But what I'm finding is that I'm dealing with a lot of young women, probably from the age of 18 or 19 up to about 30, 35 years old. And the beauty of it is that they're wanting to get to the good part. Because for me, it's about getting to the good part. The good part of my life is where I am feeling comfortable and happy and can manage the life strains and stresses, because, we all have them. But the young people are trying to do that. So
yeah,
I think that. I think what we want to do is be able to put ourselves in a position to manage the stresses and anxieties and all of that other stuff that life has to bring us. Because we're here, we're going to have all of that stuff. It's all going to be there. So
yeah,
I'm actually on Instagram too. I think it's therapist_Tracy.
Oh, you follow
me. That's so horrible. That's so horrible.
Don't worry. We got you. We're going to put all the information in our comments so that people can follow you, like you, get in contact with you, book a call, whatever they got to do, because you do specialize in relationships, groups, and individuals, especially for people that are in Atlanta. Somebody out there listens to this and they're going, I need to talk to her. So I just want to thank you so much for your time today. This was a really, really good and much needed conversation. I was excited to talk about it. So we got a lot of clarity on a lot of things. And I hope our listeners can take some of the advice that you gave and really apply it to their everyday lives. Guys, go get those books that she named because I'm a bookhead. So thank you so much for your time, Tracy. And we'll see you next time.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate you as well. All righty.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.